Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are you, Carla?
I'm good, thank you. How are you, Carlos?
All good. Thanks for asking.
Okay, we'll just wait a couple of minutes to see
Mhm.
all students are here.
Good morning. Well, good afternoon. Good morning. No, I've been up since early, so I think it just feels like today is tomorrow. Good afternoon, everybody.
Hi, Kathy.
Ahí está, ahí se ven. Estamos viendo justo los tobillos de Fernando.
I guess we'll wait 2 more minutes. There's still people joining, so, and I know that from tech, many are in the same classroom, so we cannot count heads that way, but hopefully most students will be here soon. I guess we can start with a brief introduction, Carla.
Yeah.
So welcome everybody to the marketing workshop. The idea of this workshop is to help all the different teams think about the marketing aspect of their projects. So the Mike Loya Center has been really graceful and helped us create this workshop. And I really hope that it is helpful for you guys and your projects. And if you have questions, make sure to ask our guest speaker. And also, it is also food for thought for maybe talking with your different advisors. That being said, you have all been assigned advisors and student liaisons. So the advisor should help you with any type of problems to be able to talk to your advisors. Your team lead can coordinate with your advisor, and your liaison is a student that can help you address questions or help out in the process as you guys require it. So Carla, do you want to continue, introduce our guest speaker, etc.?
Of course. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to mention that Carlos will be facilitating the workshop on market research. So it's kind of like the strategy behind. So for you to know who your customers are, the needs, behaviors, etc. And it's gonna give you like the product pricing, place and promotion maybe. Carlos, am I correct? Yes. So without ado, let me introduce you to Carlos. He is going to provide his expertise. He is a program manager at Studio G at New Mexico State University and Arrowhead Center. And Carlos has a lot of experience. Please take advantage. And as we have mentioned, Carlos is bilingual, so feel free to share any type of questions that you may have in the chat. And we will pause every so often so that Carlos can answer your questions. Thank you, Carlos,
Yeah,
so much for
definitely.
being here.
Yeah, good morning, buenas tardes con todos, good afternoon. As mentioned, my name is Carlos Cuesta. I run the Studio G program at New Mexico State University, which is a collegiate entrepreneur business incubator. So for context, students from not just NMSU, but several universities across the Borderplex region come to us with business ideas, and our job is to mentor them and help them find the right pathway to start validating their business assumptions early on. Because at the early stages, I want to preface this, everything we're thinking about, every business idea we might have, is an assumption until we can prove and validate that our hypothesis was correct. Aside from it, I also teach finance at the College of Business here at NMSU, and I've been exposed to venture capital firms. These are angel groups or large fund managers that get money together to invest in startups. So if you guys have seen Nadando con Tiburones, or if you have seen Aggie Shark Tank, those individuals might be angel investors, high net worth individuals that invest in companies that they believe on. But on another spectrum, you have a fund manager that collects money from all of them to invest in companies. So next week, if I'm not mistaken, there is a workshop on financials and funding. So that's just a preface, and you guys will go more in depth into that session. But today, we have a lot of content to cover. I'm gonna try to make this a little bit more engaging and dynamic because there's so many concepts that we can explore. But at the early stages, as I mentioned, our job is to validate every assumption we're coming up with, right? So let me share my screen super quick. Screen 2. And if someone can let me know if you guys can see my presentation over here that says market research, I would really appreciate it. Thank you, Carla.
Yes.
Thank you, Adriana. So let's go. Let's do it. Let me just get my screen sorted out over here. And welcome everybody to the Market Research Essentials Workshop. You are here because in the next month, more or less, you will be building ideas that could strengthen the binational commerce between the US and Mexico. We are in a privileged location here in the Borderplex. So that is a huge mission for all of you guys, and being exposed to working with students from other universities is something fantastic as we get to learn from each other. But to do it well, we need to ground some of your ideas in the research component of things. Now, when people hear market research, they often think of big, boring reports full of numbers and charts and long documents that no one will ever read. But that's not going to be the case for today. In entrepreneurship, we have to continuously innovate, and we have to use the scientific method more than anything. Meaning we come up with a hypothesis, then we test it, we analyze results, and we pivot continuously until we find a term known as product market fit. So our focus today is more on the practical component of market research. At this pitch competition or hackathon level, market research, we're going to implement some tools and techniques that you can actually use in the next few weeks to validate some of the ideas you and your groups are coming up with. Primarily, as mentioned, to test your hypothesis and test your assumptions, therefore giving you enough confidence to pitch them whenever that time comes. Okay, so with that preface, I want to encourage you guys to take notes if you're not doing that already. But market research matters because at the end of the day, it simply reduces guesswork, right? It helps you answer 3 fundamental questions. Number 1, where are the opportunities? What risks could we be exposed to? How do we position ourselves for success, right? So a quick side story to this is we can look at a Grupo Modelo, the Corona beer. When they entered the US market, they discovered that American consumers saw Mexican beer as somewhat exotic, relaxing. Sometimes we associate Mexican beers with the coast, being at the beach, vacation, holidays, and whatnot. So by leaning into that image, Modelo came up with a campaign, Find Your Beach, and Corona became the #1 imported beer in the US. Why am I saying this? Because it didn't happen just by accident. It happened because the company listened to consumer perceptions and they built a strategy around it. So remember, smart research transforms ideas into viable cross-border ventures. Now, before we collect any single piece of data, when we start doing market research, we need to be clear on what questions we are asking or what assumptions we are trying to validate. There are 3 that every team should start with. Number 1 is market demand. Where is the unmet need, or where is the unmet demand? What products or services are missing in cross-border commerce, right? Also, on that note, I want to encourage you guys to think about what products or services are already being offered, and do they come short? Are they still relevant, or are they the best alternative solution people have as of right now? Meaning, is there room for improvement? Is there room for innovation? The second component is who else is already working in this space and how good are they at it? right? And the one that we're going to be exposed to the most is what barriers are out there in this particular industry, what regulations would affect our business idea, what cultural differences would affect our business and value proposition, or simply logistics. Are there any logistics that might block us from doing commerce between two different countries? So if you don't define these, most likely you will simply drown in a lot of information. But if you do define them, your research becomes very focused and efficient. Now, the slides you're going to see in yellow are practical tools you all have access to. And these are frameworks we can start using. So to answer the biggest question on like, what is your market demand, competitors, barriers we might face, I highly recommend all of you guys to use a business model Canva. In this case, we have the lean version of it. It's the simplified version of it. But regardless of it, there is 9 square boxes that could walk us through what our business model is. But I want to encourage all of you to begin this journey by focusing on the leaner canvas. Instead of filling out all 9 boxes of the lean canvas, just focus on the 4 primary ones. The problem, what is the biggest pain point? Existing alternatives, how are people solving it now? Customer segments, basically who are you targeting? And early adopters, who would be the first customer in line to dive deep into this and try your solution out? Each of these boxes translate into research questions. For example, if you think about cross-border truckers need a better logistic app, your questions might be, what's the hardest part for them about managing their shipment? What apps or tools are they already using? Would small independent truckers adopt this before big logistic firms? Those are the riskiest questions we have to be able to answer early on when we're forming these hypotheses. So remember, the linear canvas keeps your research grounded in reality, and it forces you to validate problems and customers, not just to dream up about different business ideas and solutions. Now, with that in mind, just to emphasize something, let me stop sharing for a sec. If I ask you guys, what is an alternative to McDonald's? You are probably, after this session, you guys are given the opportunity to go to McDonald's. What other existing alternatives are out there? Anybody can unmute themselves or put it in the chat and we can read that super quick.
Chick-fil-A.
Okay, Shasta, we went with Chick-fil-A. Anyone else? If you don't go to McDonald's, what is an existing alternative to McDonald's?
Whataburger.
Okay, we got Whataburger, Chick-fil-A. Oh, we got a lot. Five Guys, Chick-fil-A, Burger King, Carl's Jr. And this is the perfect time to stop for a second and rethink the way we perceive existing alternatives, right? Because if you noticed, we are only focusing on hamburger places, mainly targeting direct competitors to McDonald's, but the alternatives we're given are endless, right? It could be Taco Bell, it could be a sit-down restaurant. An existing alternative to this could be going to a grocery store and just dining in, meaning that McDonald's is not only competing with Burger King, Wendy's, and Chick-fil-A, they compete with every other option customers are given. One of them being just cooking at home, right? So always try to think beyond the most obvious competitors a company might have, and try to explore what is it that companies are exposed to, like what are some existing alternatives people might prefer or might use to overcome the problem they're facing. Now, with that being said, I highly recommend all of you guys to start with these 4 square boxes before you transition onto the full lean canvas where we unlock all of the 9 boxes. On this one, if you notice, then we talk about the solution. Why didn't we mention the solution early on? Because our job is not to come up with the best solution, but to identify what is the most prevalent problem or pain point for potential customers. If we figure out what the problem is, what problem they're facing, we are 50 to 60% done launching a company, because the solutions could be multiple, right? So then we have the solution box, the unique value proposition. That means what added value are you offering to your potential consumers? A high-level concept is just an analogy to explain what you're trying to do in simple terms. Unfair advantage. This one is not always intuitive early on, because an unfair advantage is something you cannot buy with money, and it's something that develops over time, right? And we'll come back to that one shortly. Channels are the pathway that you have to your consumers, and obviously we have revenue and cost structure, which you guys will dive deeper into upcoming sessions. But the Lean Canvas turns big ideas into testable assumptions, giving teams like yours a roadmap to what research first instead of just guessing. Now, before I get asked all the questions about unfair advantage, this one is the most difficult square or box to answer, because as I mentioned, we cannot join the market and have an unfair advantage from the get-go. For example, we can explore Facebook. When Facebook launched their company, they didn't have an unfair advantage clearly defined, but as opposed to it, it developed over time. Same thing with Apple, same thing with phone carriers. So as an exercise, what is something Facebook does right now that no one can replicate? Meaning that if I have $10 billion to compete with Facebook and I create the Carlos's book or the Carlos's app, how many of you guys would switch to my new platform, even though it's better than Facebook? Why wouldn't people switch over? What do you guys think? Either put it in the chat or unmute yourself.
People don't like change. It's hard to change everything, a new password, a new account, a new app.
Okay, so there might be a barrier on that one. Excellent. Anyone else?
Because they have been the default for a long time.
Okay, it's our default, so we're going back to old habits. Hamza, okay, the chat is lining up. Let's go. Let me read it. Hamza said all your contacts and friends should switch to. Their friends don't want to move to a new platform. It's dependent on user interaction, and Facebook has already a lot of users. Exactly, we are spot on. So the unfair advantage that Facebook built over time, it's known as the network effect. What most of the chat was alluding to right now, it is completely okay what it was mentioned, like there's old habits that are really difficult to break. But something money cannot buy is the network effect that Facebook created over time, meaning that if I switch from one platform to another, I'm gonna be isolated. I'm gonna have to come back and try to convince all of my Facebook friends or Instagram friends or whatever friends I have to switch over with me. So that becomes a very significant barrier to entry, because it is almost impossible for people to switch from Facebook or Instagram to a brand new platform unless there is a massive switching trigger. So that is a moat, or that is an unfair advantage that money cannot buy. Another one, exploring Apple, for example, and many of you guys are already familiar with this. Apple's unfair advantage differs from Facebook in a way because they've developed an advantage known as switching costs. It is too costly for you to switch from Apple to Android. What do I mean by that? If you replace your phone, your iPhone, for a Samsung phone, that would entail you would have to switch your watch. You would have to switch your computer, most likely, your cloud storage. So there's too many things that we would have to switch in order to leave Apple behind. So this switching cost ended up becoming an unfair advantage for Apple as well. That's why I'm trying to say, don't worry too much about this one early on. This tends to come with time. Another unfair advantage also could be the founders. If you have a clear niche and expertise in a particular area, that could be an unfair advantage that's very difficult to replicate. The case of also Apple, Steve Jobs, even though he was removed from his company, he was the brain behind the vision Apple had. So once he stepped down from the CEO role, Apple didn't know which way to go, so they had to bring him back after they fired him, obviously. Now let me switch over. We have the slides. Cool. So step one, write down your hypothesis. Lean Canvas is the best way to do it. It's very rapid and easy to experiment. Now we're getting into gathering second data. Secondary data is the information that's already out there. We know that whatever we can find on Google, textbooks, research papers, AI tools, and whatnot. So think of government reports, trade statistics, industry studies. There's some great resources out there for this particular competition, like the US Census Bureau and Trade Government for export and import data, the INEGI in Mexico for trade and economic stats, ITC Trade Map for commodity level details. So if you see that cross-border e-commerce is growing double digits year over year, that is some data you can find online, meaning secondary data. That is not just a number. It also tells you a signal of a potential opportunity. If an industry is growing, maybe there is an opportunity for you to join that momentum. So don't just collect data and ask yourself, what story does this data tell me about the future of cross-border commerce? Traditionally, we can use this framework, the market sizing framework. Many of you guys have heard of it already. The total addressable market, serviceable available market, and the serviceable obtainable market. It is a great starting point to collecting data to validate some of the assumptions we determined early on. But once you've got some secondary data, you need to turn it into an estimate of your opportunity. Judges or investors, and for yourself as well, you want to estimate how big is this opportunity, right? So here is where the total addressable market is the entire pie. For example, all US and Mexico shipments. Your serviceable available market is the slice of the pie that, given your research, you can narrow it down to geography, regulations, or cultural limits. For example, simply shipments in border states like Texas, New Mexico, Chihuahua, and Juarez. And the one we really want to focus on is the serviceable obtainable market, the piece that you could actually win in the short term. For example, small and medium enterprise shipping less than $50,000 per month. This exercise forces you to think both big and realistic. Judges, investors, the consumers, they don't just want numbers. They want to know how big this opportunity is or how big the opportunity can get. But most importantly, where you will start. Something I want to preface to everybody is that in most pitch competitions, there is a common mistake across presentations. And it's when students come in and they show their total addressable market with a huge figure on like $20 billion. And then it's mentioned, just imagine if we could achieve only 1% of this market. It's still pretty decent, like the dollar value you could get if you go after a market that's worth $20 billion. But I can imagine many things. I can imagine you getting 1%. I can imagine you getting 5%. I can imagine you getting 100% of it. It doesn't matter. What matters the most is how do you plan on reaching that 1%? Is it even realistic? Is it even viable, feasible, achievable? That is the question, because investors, judges, everybody, we can imagine a lot of things, but what matters the most is the action plan that you have in order to get there. Now, this is more academic, switching over to the a different estimate that we can allude to, and some of you guys are already familiar with, is what happens when data is not available, right? Can we just guess or estimate assumptions? We could. This is known as the back of the envelope calculations. If you grab a napkin, you write down some numbers trying to see how big the opportunity is. In many cases, if we do things logically, we can achieve very close to realistic numbers. So if you don't have data, that's where the Fermi estimate comes in. For example, the question I have right here, and I know, Amber, you already know the answer to this one, but how many Starbucks stores are in the US? So there is 4 components to it. Number 1 is break the big question into smaller parts. What are key variables that you know you can estimate? Then we can make educated guesses for each part, like using general knowledge, intuition, ratios, or lived experiences. Then the math comes in, but it's simple math. Multiply your assumptions and combine your estimates to get a ballpark result. And lastly, do the reality check. Does it feel reasonable? Cross-check with something you actually know. So I'm gonna ask you all, without tempering the exercise, without using Google, without using ChatGPT, just try to work on this and think creatively. How many Starbucks stores are in the US? So let's take about 2 to 3 minutes, try to use this framework, and then someone just let us know what number you came up with. But please don't Google anything, don't use ChatGPT. Let's take about 2-3 minutes and we'll go through your thought process on this one, okay? I'll leave the screen up. If anyone already has a number in mind, go for it. Explain to us the logic. There's no wrong answer on this one, because remember, we're just basing this off assumptions. Okay, Hamza, is it okay if you unmute yourself for a second? Just tell us how you got the 120,000 stores. What was the
Hello,
logic behind it? Mhm.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. This is an information I heard recently. It's like there is a Chinese company trying to compete with Starbucks in US,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe I'm wrong or right. I remember it was like 120,000 Starbucks already exist in US. So
Okay.
this is where my information comes from.
Okay, sounds good. And we're just gonna pick on someone else. Emilio, is it okay if you explain how you arrived at 23,000 Starbucks stores?
Um, I think it's because in many cities it's primarily located in big cities.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Awesome. So let me walk you guys through my thought process, okay? And I did this process with Amber a while ago, but for example, the way I would break down the big question into smaller parts, what are some key variables we can estimate? The first thing that I could think of is how many states are in the US, right? And that is something we know. There is 50 states. Then we can make a random guess or a random assumption that each state probably has between 30 to 50 cities or towns where a store might exist, right? Up until now, it's all assumption based. We're going based on what Hamza mentioned, like things we know. Then we can make an educated guess. And on this one, what we said is most likely a big city or a medium-sized city might have 10 Starbucks stores within their city. Right up until now, if you notice, I'm just going based off the things that I think I know. So then we multiply our assumptions based on these two estimates, as opposed to Hamza, sorry, man, but I estimated something lower, closer to what Emilio mentioned. On the high estimate, I could think that there is 50 states, 50 cities within each state, and 50 stores per city, giving me a number of potentially 25,000 stores. On the low estimate, 50 states, 30 big cities per state, 10 stores per state, potentially 15,000 stores. Now, does that sound realistic? Once we compare this to reality, we can get the average between those two numbers and estimate or ballpark that there are 20,000 stores in the US. The actual number of stores, Starbucks stores that are in the US is close to 16,000. So this is the power of using a Fermi estimate. We're not going to get to the closest or the most accurate value or number, but we can get within one order of magnitude to reality. So if we don't have data, it's not impossible for us to estimate based on these assumptions how many stores are out there. Okay. So with that being said, I want to transition over to an example, which is stress testing feasibility, if it's actually a feasible pathway we can embark on. So once again, there's four simple steps on this one. We're gonna determine our minimum success criteria, meaning like how much money do you want to generate per year? Then this could be 100K, a million. Let's avoid from accuracy. Let's ignore accuracy and just focus on order of magnitude values just to get close estimates. It could be $100,000 in annual recurring revenue, most likely enough to quit our day job. $1 million, it's small enough for a 3 to 5 person company. $10 million in annual recurring revenue might become venture capital backable, meaning like investors might be attracted to it. Or over 100 million, we created a unicorn company that could grow and potentially become public. So step number one, determine your minimum success criteria, the minimum outcome that justifies you continuing. For example, Facebook was offered to be bought out by MySpace, and I think they offered them $50 million for the whole company. But Mark Zuckerberg turned down the offer because he made a counter offer saying, give me 70 million. So his minimum success criteria was 70 million at the time, and he didn't know. And look at what Facebook turned out to be later on. The second step is determine what customer archetype you're going after, right? How much are customers going to pay you on a yearly basis? Is it $10, $100, 1,000, 10,000, 100K, or a million? Once again, order of magnitude just to simplify the process. And then how many customers do you need to reach your minimum success criteria? And then we can choose a beachhead market to compare the number of customers we need versus the size of the market that we're estimating. To put things into perspective, let's do a case study between all of us. The coffee bean cracking software for Starbucks. We are so smart and we came up with this idea with our groups. We're gonna create a software that will crack and trace back where the coffee beans came from. It tracks the beans from a farm to the exporter, to the roaster, all the way to the store. Every bag would have a digital record. Sustainability tracking, logs certifications like Fairtrade, Rainforest Alliance, or if it's organic. Quality control, records batch quality, roast date, freshness, and transit conditions. On compliance and reporting. It generates reports for regulators, investors on sourcing ethics, carbon footprint, and whatnot. And lastly, we have consumer transparency. We could even provide a QR code on the cups to let our customers know and see where their coffee came from. Okay, so that is the company we're going after. So if we have to apply this model to see if our software even has legs and a chance to survive in the market, we would need to determine our success or minimum success criteria. Since we are aiming high, we are hoping to generate $10 million in annual recurring revenue because we want to receive the investment of a potential venture capital firm at some point. Now, we've done some research on this, and we estimated that our customers are going to be mouses, meaning they're going to pay us $100 per year for this software. We are going to consider each Starbucks store as a customer, right? So each Starbucks store that we work with will pay us $100 a month in order to use this software we've created. Now, the question for all of you guys is, how many customers do we need to reach our minimum success criteria? How many Starbucks stores do we need to pay us $100 in order for us to reach our $10 million minimum success criteria per year? If you remember, we would have to take 10 million divided by 100, what they're paying us on a yearly basis. What would that be? In the chat, anybody? How many customers do we need? So what is 10 million divided by 100?
100,000.
Thank you, Kathy. So it would mean that we need at least 100,000 Starbucks stores. Now, based on the work we just did, we determined that if Starbucks is our beachhead market, this idea is not feasible. Our strategy wouldn't work under these conditions. Why? Because for us to reach our minimum success criteria, we need 100,000 stores, but there are only 16,000 stores in the US, right? So all of these calculations and all these hypotheses we came up with, it's without looking at secondary data, just using Fermi estimates and trying to see if with the back of the envelope calculations, this idea would work or not. Then we can go into more accurate details and whatnot if we think there is room for improvement. But this result that we see right here is telling us that our business is not feasible. We need to pivot. It's not going to work out. Now, does that mean we should completely throw away our business plan? No. What can we do to make this business viable? What are some variables we could change to make it work? Number one, we could charge more, right? Instead of charging $100, maybe we can charge them $1,000 per year per store. That would lower our number of stores to only 10,000 out of the 16,000 stores that are out there. Is that doable? Can we conquer more than 50% of the Starbucks stores out there in the market? It's probably a big push. I'm not saying it's impossible, but generating market share might be too difficult if we're trying to aim for a 50% market share dominance right off the get-go, right? So try to use these models just to estimate whether or not your idea has legs early on. Back of the envelope calculations. And now switching over to the second component of this is that secondary tells us what is happening, but primary research can tell you why. This means talking directly to potential customers, partners, or distributors, right? We can base our hypothesis on secondary data as we saw, but where we're going to find the best results are using primary research, going out and actually talking to customers. So here is the catch. most students, some of you might be thinking about this already, that the best way to talk to a customer directly is to create a focus group or send out a Google form, a survey, and just reach the masses and get the inputs on people. These techniques are useful for later, but not for now. So at the discovery stage, these results could actually be misleading. And that brings us to our next slide. Surveys, why don't they work early on? Because you are writing the questions and assuming the answers you're giving to people. And that is dangerous when you don't know the full truth. There's the concept of you don't know what you don't know, right? So we're just making assumptions on what to ask and what options we give to people. Some of you guys might be thinking like, well, we can make a survey that's open-ended. Yeah, but think about the last survey you answered to. You're just trying to give the most short and concise answer and skip to the next question in a way. So we are missing the human connection, the human interaction, the exploration of pain points early on. Now, focus groups might not work early on because we could fall into the group thinking where one loud voice would simply dominate and everyone, just to avoid confrontation, you avoid sharing your actual thoughts because someone else was more confident and shared their thoughts and maybe you don't agree with them, but then the group thinking becomes part of the discovery process. So customer discovery is where you find early truths, one-on-one, open-ended conversations where you let people tell you about their frustrations in their own words. That's the goal you're looking for, right? The human connection, the human interaction. In your cases, I know you guys have a month, but you could get into talking to someone early on and just explore how they're doing business, what solutions they're using, what pain points they're facing, but having the ability to listen. Early on, we are in the business of learning. We are not pitching, we're not offering solutions, we're trying to understand what problems potential customers are facing. So how does this framework work? There's 3 segments to it, or 2 segments primarily. The first one is the problem interviews for early stage. And the core goal of this is to understand the pain points and current solutions. What is the hardest part about cross-border tax? Or what is the hardest part for you to export to the US? Or what is the hardest part for you to import from Mexico? Try to gauge and see what the pain points are. Don't be leading with your questions. The second one would be, how are you solving it today? What tools are you using? And explore what shortcomings those tools might have. And what do you wish existed? Is there anything that would make this process simpler? Don't pitch, don't sell, just be curious to understand. Now, if you already have a solution in mind, potentially, here is where you can try to validate your idea and see if it resonates with them. You can ask them, if this solution existed, would you try it? And gauge their response. What would make it valuable to you? How would you normally pay for this type of solution? How much would you pay? How much are you paying for the existing solution you're using? Try to learn as much as you can early on from these conversations. Normally, this is a fundamental framework for startups, and startups are encouraged to talk to 50 to 100 customers. But for this particular task you guys were given, if you establish 1 to 5 conversations, that seems pretty doable. And even within those 5 conversations, you might find very useful information. And some key mindsets to have before you go on to your discovery journey is be curious, not convincing, meaning you're not selling, you're not pitching, you're trying to understand. Avoid leading questions. Try to avoid those as much as possible and focus on stories more than yes or no questions. You want the full picture. You don't just want an answer that will affirm your biases. An example of this, Hamza, are you still there with us? Not yet. Or Shasta, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Shasta, so how is this amazing workshop going for you?
I think it's going very well. I'm learning quite a bit.
Cool. So if you notice, that was a rookie mistake on my end because I wanted to affirm my biases with Shasta. So I asked her a completely um, leading question, right? I asked her how are you enjoying this workshop? How good is this workshop going? I am putting adjectives to see if she agrees with my personal biases. It would have been completely different if I asked her, hey Shasta, what are your thoughts on the workshop thus far? It's plain, not a leading question, and I'm hoping to get a much deeper response from her. So being cautious with our biases is fundamental when we go out there and let me check the chat. Cool. And interview people. We're in the process of learning more than in the process of just confirming our own personal biases. So be cautious with leading questions and focus on stories. Try to ask open-ended questions instead of yes or no questions. Now, to begin wrapping up the session, we need to be mindful of this for the particular competition. Culture and regulation can make or break your idea. Culturally speaking, we can think about the language, trust, consumer habits, how people make payments like credit cards, apps. In Mexico, it might be more cash in some places. So we need to be fully aware of those cultural differences. When it comes to regulations, there is plenty of regulations, especially between cross-border transactions. So look at the tariffs, the labelings, certifications. If you miss this, your product might never enter the market or your idea might not be viable whatsoever. So a real example of this, and I'm sure we're all familiar with this, is the Flaming Hot Cheetos. It was originally developed in the US, and the product became a massive hit because it tapped into the Mexican consumer preferences for bolder and spicier flavors. By leaning into the cultural taste, the packaging, the branding, Cheetos didn't just succeed, they became a cultural icon on both sides of the border, right? So the lesson of this is when you adapt your product to local cultures and preferences, you don't just sell more, but you build loyalty and potentially your identity as well. So be aware of these cultural factors that might interfere with your business planning. Now, some more work for you guys to look at. This is something you see in your classes, but you're not alone in this market, and it's very important for you to acknowledge the presence of competitors. Step number one, map out who they are and what they offer. Step number two, identify their gaps on their offerings. What are some needs that remain unmet? And step number three, use perceptual maps, for example, plot price versus quality, or the ones that we are the most familiar with, the SWOT analysis, right? Where we've heard of this in many classes, lectures, and business presentations. Our strengths or weaknesses are internal to our operations, whereas our opportunities and threats are things that are not within our control. They are external forces that we are exposed to. So the point of this isn't to look perfect, but to be honest to yourself and to show that you've thought about all those risks. Judges, investors, customers respect teams that say, yes, there is tough regulations, but here is the plan we have to navigate and overcome those risks we've identified. That builds credibility. And now to wrap up, we have calculating cost and pricing strategies. Don't forget that every market entry has a cost. Think about production, logistics, compliance, distribution. Here is a great example of how pricing and cost structures innovate and create opportunities. Many small independent restaurants, I'm tapping into the example of Fonda. It's a local startup in California, but they noticed that many small independent restaurants would lose 15 to 20% of their revenues using platforms like Uber Eats or DoorDash. So this company stepped in with a different model. They consolidated all of the orders from all channels into one dashboard. They let the restaurants run their own storefronts and encourage direct ordering to consumers. By shifting traffic away from third-party apps and giving owners more control over pricing and upsells, Fonda helped them capture more value. The lesson here is that sometimes the smartest pricing move isn't about lowering the customer's price. It's about helping the businesses keep more of the money that they've already earned. So pricing isn't just math, it's a strategy. And lastly, before we open this up to questions, there's some resources you're probably already familiar with, but I encourage you guys to go and look into trade.gov, as I mentioned, for US export intelligence, Global Edge for international data, ITC Trademap, as we mentioned, for detailed trade flows, or export.gov for industry insights. You don't need 100 pages of research for this competition. Focus on 3 or 5 insights that can change your business model. So to summarize everything into one graph, it's going to be fairly complex, but step number 1 for all of you guys is define your questions, define your assumptions, work on a lean canvas early on so you can lay down your hypothesis. Second step, gather data and try to validate these assumptions and hypotheses right off the get-go using secondary data or primary data. As we mentioned, market sizing or customer discovery interviews are great steps to validate your ideas. Analyze insights. Let's take a look at the TAM, SAM, SOM analysis or your SWOT analysis as well. And most importantly, validate and execute. Test it with real people, have real conversations. Don't just talk to ChatGPT or Google. Go out and actually try to talk to individuals that might be facing these problems and seek that validation. Remember that teams that win aren't the ones with the flashiest idea, the shiniest idea. Teams that win are the ones that show they've validated their problem, understood their customer segments, and position their solution smartly. So don't focus on a beautiful PowerPoint presentation with cool numbers that might sound shiny and flashy. Try to build some credibility and validation that you've done your work, you've done your research, you laid out your hypothesis, and you brought tangible results to the table that whatever you are proposing has legs, could work, and customers would be paying for it and they need it. Okay? So any questions or comments from the audience? I know that took almost an hour, so sorry about that, guys. Any questions either in the chat? No questions on Fernanda. Thank you, Fernanda. I feel like a YouTuber checking the chat.
Who is it best to ask these questions to? You know, your friends, family. Who's best to ask questions to when you're trying to do this research?
Yeah, what I think and what I recommend early on is if you're doing your lean canvas and stating your hypothesis, talk to your group, talk to your teammates, and work together on it. I encourage you guys to toss in your idea also into ChatGPT and leverage that tool and see how clearly you can communicate what you're trying to solve with ChatGPT. Once you have your hypothesis laid out and your lean canvas fully complete, I would go out and actually talk to individuals outside of your social network. If you go out and you talk to your mom, you talk to your dad, you talk to your friends, and you tell them about this idea, most likely they'll agree with you and they'll tell you that sounds great because they love you and respect you, right? It's the analogy we always use and it always goes south, but when you have a baby, your family is not going to tell you your baby is ugly, right? They're going to tell you your baby is beautiful, it looks like the dad, oh my goodness, and whatnot. But strangers might have a different opinion. They might actually tell you the truth, saying like, oh yeah, that baby might need glasses, or oh yeah, that baby might need some braces at some point and whatnot. So that's what you're seeking. Don't talk to your social circle, talk to your advisors, talk to people in the industry in the US or in Mexico, since you have a multicultural team. Split the work, split the questions, go out and talk to different individuals within the industry you're trying to solve or bring a solution for, and be ready for feedback. Many times they might not agree with you, they might not see the vision in you, and it's not the time for you to put up your walls and disagree with them and start a fight with them and whatnot. That's not what you're there for. You're there trying to understand what is it that they're not seeing, what is it that you didn't convey properly, why don't they agree with you, why do they think your baby needs braces early on. Try to get that feedback early on so you can work on it and improve later on. Does that answer your question, Shasta?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have one more, just since this is such a short competition. What would be the 3 things like you would say to start with to get the most out of this?
Given the time frame, I want to emphasize a lean canvas. It's fundamental early on, as discussed throughout the session. Secondary research is fundamental. Try to understand what solutions are out there and what regulations prevent those solutions from existing, or what barriers there are to entry. And if you guys have the time within this month, for real, you're gonna believe me once you do it, the value of talking to people that are affected by the problem you've discovered is fundamental. You're not gonna be able to talk to 100 people in a month, but if you can have 3 to 5 conversations with someone that's actually experiencing this pain point, it will give you a lot more insights and credibility once you do your pitch. Excellent information. And could you share a guided and templates to fill in the requested data? Yeah, I can forward the slides and some templates on the frameworks that you guys can use with your groups. I showed you multiple tools and frameworks, but not everyone will be adequate for every group. So pick and choose the one that's the most efficient for you. But remember, your goal is to build credibility towards the pitch, and make sure your idea is not just an idea, but there is arguments that back it up, that there's a real problem, a real need, and it's a viable solution, the one you could be offering. But I'll share the information, Gabriela. No worries.
Carlos, I have a question for you. How does this tie in with their eventual financial aspect of the competition? So looking at projections, all of that.
Definitely. So something that from the investor point of view and whatnot, it is important to have financial projections, but let's not forget that in many cases, or in the majority of cases, financial projections are based on assumptions of what we could do. So it's important to showcase those assumptions with actionable data, right? Saying that if we're going to reach $100,000 in revenue, proving to them that there are enough players in the industry that you could reach within a short amount of time, right? Pricing your product, it's important once you compare it to the other alternatives people already have. Or when you look at developing a solution, in many cases, you're trying to remove a pain people are facing or increase the benefit people could expect from you. Therefore, your unique value proposition. So the more value you create, the more people will be willing to pay you. Or the more you reduce a pain point, the more value you're creating as well. So pricing your product is an art, but if you know your pricing and you know how big your market is or your early adopters are, you can demonstrate your financial projections, but make sure it sounds realistic, right? Remember the analogy I was saying, many students go out and say like the market size of this particular industry is $20 billion. Imagine if we get 1%. It's cool, but action items, how can you reach that 1%? Is it feasible within the borderplex? Are there enough, I don't know, truck drivers in this space that would benefit from the solution? And showcase that it's viable and feasible early on.
Thank you, Carlos. I think there's another question by Gabriela Velasco.
What recommendations can you give us to focus the business based on your experience, projected years, and key information? Where can the classification of customer types you used be consulted? Okay, let me go with the first one. The first one is part of the challenge. As you guys have noticed, cross-border transportation and supply chain remains as a prevalent issue. Another one is cross-border payments. That's another industry that remains complex. Cryptocurrencies are trying to address that issue, but it's still unclear where cryptocurrencies will go. But we've been exposed to several participants, primarily from Mexico, trying to bring goods onto the US. And there's a huge opportunity there too. Why aren't local farmers in Mexico exporting to the US? Are there regulations that are preventing that? Is there an easy solution that would mitigate that risk and would make this completely viable? Is it labeling? Is it supply chain issues? Is it tariffs? And that's where the creativity kick in. And Gabriela, for the second question, where can the classification of customer types you used be consulted? I can send that to you guys on the notes. It is a very well-known framework known as the customer archetype framework. It's for, as I mentioned, back of the envelope calculations. Instead of you getting stuck on the right most accurate pricing, just ballpark estimate your assumptions. Would these people pay you $10 a year, $100 a year, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, a million? It doesn't matter. Because just with simple assumptions like that one, you can gauge whether or not this would become feasible or not later on. Once you pass that proof, then we can get into the more accurate details of your assumptions. Because I'm sure in that example, we could have used $500 instead of 100 and 1,000, right? We could have gone with 500, but that adds a layer of complexity. We're trying to remove that early on just to validate the feasibility of your studies. But I'll send you guys a document on customer archetypes so you can take a look at how that process works. Any other questions? Yep, you're welcome.
You can focus on whatever type of business you want. It can be a service, it can be a product, it can be whatever you guys want. I'm sorry, Carlos, I interrupted. You should be
No,
the
you're
one
good.
answering. You should be the one answering.
No, you're good. You got it. You know this more than I do. Yeah, and also remember, it could be a service or it could be a product. It could be a SaaS company too. It could be a software app that could be used potentially to reduce friction with supply chain or with the import and export of goods. Like there's many options on that one. And it could become a franchise, Gabriela. Go for it, and then I'll buy one of your franchises. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you so much for your time, Carlos. We really appreciate it. I think it has been super insightful. And I think you have given good tips in terms of what to do, given a more compacted timing, and I think it will be very useful for students. And we would really appreciate your presentation and the template. So I think that these will be very useful for students as they're looking at identifying their product and looking at start doing back of the envelope calculations, etc.
Excellent. And if I may, I just see that Mario has a question. It says for everybody, for context, how useful is it to gather insights from competitors that are already in the market and have similar concept? Is it more useful to gather customer insights or competitor insights? So as part of the discovery process, remember, like customers are already using existing alternatives. Your job is to find out what are they using and why are they still facing the problems? Meaning, in many cases, we use the best possible solution out there, but we might not be fully satisfied with the outcome. There still might be prevalent issues with the solutions we're using. So that's what leads to innovation, right? So understanding what is it that your competitors are doing is fundamental, and why isn't it working the way it should, right? Because if a solution was working 100%, there wouldn't be any room for improvement or innovation. So understand what are they doing and why are customers not fully satisfied with that solution would be the best way to approach that, right? And John, I can shoot you an email on that one, or Shasta might be able to. But yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it, Carla. Thank you for everything. Kate, Kathy.
No pasa nada.
Sorry, everybody, thank you. And I just want to congratulate all of you guys for taking this step and doing an extracurricular activity. For some of you guys who are taking this seriously, the best way to learn is by doing it. You guys have been exposed to so many classes, and now it's the time to put it into practice. So don't see this as a tedious assignment. See it as a learning opportunity for you. It's a one-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Enjoy the process, and believe it or not, this month will go by so fast, and you're going to start thinking back at how good of a time you had with meeting new people and exploring new business ideas and whatnot. So enjoy the process, guys. And yeah, thank you everybody for putting this together. I know it takes a lot of effort, so congratulations to everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Carlos. And I just wanted to echo what Kathy mentioned. Thank you so much for your time and for providing your fantastic expertise to our teams. And teams, I hope you have like a really great foundation now on how to proceed with your project. So please let us know if you have any questions. Again, Carlos, thank you so much for being here and providing your time.
Absolutely.
Carla, the session was recorded, right?
Yes, it is.
Perfect. So we can provide to the students. So if they need to go back and focus on some sort of concept, that would be great.
Of course, I will forward it once everything, you know how it takes a little while, but I'll share it.
Perfect. Thank you. And to all the teams, hopefully you have all been settled with your correct teams. I know that last week we had a little bit of a problem in our first meeting trying to set you guys in teams. So